Welcome to Global Diabetes Insights, your go-to podcast for navigating the world of diabetes. I am Tino, a certified diabetes educator and a global advocate for non-communicable diseases.
And I'm Kona, a global advocate and a medical doctor. Together, we're your hosts, dedicated to raising awareness, fostering open discussions, and creating a safe space for everyone affected by diabetes.
Join us as we dive into empowering conversations with individuals living with diabetes, caregivers, healthcare professionals, and researchers. Our goal is to not only guide you through effective diabetes management, but also to inspire advocacy for proper healthcare access.
So get ready for a journey of insights, ideas, and diverse perspectives. Let's amplify our collective voice and create positive change. Get involved, get engaged, and join us in creating the change we need. So welcome everybody to Global Diabetes Insights.
Thank you so much. Welcome to this very special episode of the Global Diabetes Insights, where today we are tuning to spotlight women who stand beside some of the most passionate diabetes advocates that we know in this global diabetes community. From around the world, people are doing things. Our healthcare systems are different, but maybe today we're just going to learn from the women who are supporting, who are pillars that I see as witnesses or partners of some of the people or some of the gentlemen that we know that are active in the diabetes community, that are traveling around the world, attending conferences, speaking, or even discussing some of the things that we see today happening. So today we'll meet Maryjane, we'll meet Jane and Jackie, all bringing each not only personal insight from their relationship, but also rich professional and cultural lanes from Australia, Germany, Stroke, Belgium, and Northern Ireland. So I think it's going to be amazing. So together we explore the real and the unfiltered stories behind the scenes of diabetes advocacy, the quiet resilience, and the moments of fear that we always have to reflect on them if they're shared. Maybe the joys, the unseen labor of love. This episode is a celebration of support systems, I believe. And a reminder that living with type 1 diabetes is never a solo act, but that there's always behind that empowered voice. There's someone anchoring, maybe supporting, pushing, encouraging that we don't always see. We cannot thank them enough. There's often someone holding space, asking the right questions, and carrying the load in a quiet way. So thank you so much, ladies, for being part of this podcast. I believe we can dive into this conversation that blends love, advocacy, humanity, in the most profound ways. To start with, I would allow everyone to introduce themselves, starting with maybe Jackie. Over to you.
Morning, my name's Jackie Smith, live in Northern Ireland. I'm married to Alistair, who works as a volunteer with Diabetes UK.
I'm Maryjane Aviles. I'm married to Leon Tribe, who is a patient advocate and passionate, I would say, type 1 diabetes warrior. Very great pleasure to be here.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm based in Belgium, Brussels. I'm British. I'm married to Christopher, who is German. He is a civil servant, and he was diagnosed with LADA at age 43.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that. Usually we don't always see you, right? But you're behind the scenes. We know that you're there. If we are seeing these people shining in the spotlight, we know that there is a great support system. We always want to reflect from that. It's always great. So the community asks that we always try to bring those voices that are unheard. I'll start with the general questions and then we'll go specific to some of the regional perspectives that we could also learn. Maybe hear from your perspective as supporters, partners, and witnesses of people living with diabetes. The first question that I have, knowing that baby diabetes came probably before the marriage or after, what did you know about type 1 diabetes before your partner was diagnosed?
A theoretical knowledge from classes in school where we'd studied biology. We would have learnt what diabetes was and what it did to the body, but no real living experience. I did have a friend at school who had type 1, but we're talking here back in the early 70s. So there was really very little control and monitoring and tracking and treatment 40, 50 years ago was very, very different to what it is today. So it really wasn't something I would have discussed with my friend. We knew she was diabetic, but that was about all there was to it. She came to school like the rest of us and she went home again. There was no real treatment. It was like Alistair at that stage, her injections were all at home. So it didn't really impact on her day-to-day school life. So it didn't impact on us either. She didn't ever have any problems in school. she was very fortunate, I suppose, in that way. But apart from sort of the theoretical knowledge, until I met Alistair, I had no real living experience. And then I had to start and learn.
I think prior to Leon's diagnosis, he was also 43 and diagnosed with LADA. So that's really interesting in of its own. I think I knew the basics. And I think in Australia, mostly it's about type 2. So for us, it was quite a journey to actually learn that there was type 1 and there was also various categories. So really it was the basics. I think what transformed over that period, over the past 8 years or so, is just obviously the things that we all know, the constant nature of it, the constant management of it, those kinds of things that perhaps we didn't realise, which is interesting to hear Jackie's experience there in terms of her school time. I mean, watching Leon be diagnosed and then go through that journey of constant management, every decision, every day, totally, completely changed my understanding of not just diabetes, but type 1 as well. So that was kind of my experience.
For me, I think, again, I knew very basic things. I thought type 1 diabetes was something that kids got. I had no idea you could get it as an adult. I thought adults, it was more the sort of so-called type 2 lifestyle form of diabetes. So that was a huge learning curve. And I think I just thought it was something, you injected insulin a few times a day and got on with stuff. I had no idea how involved the process of living with diabetes is and how it affects every aspect of your life. And I think that's been the biggest kind of learning and the biggest change, was really understanding what it takes to live with diabetes and what it takes to live well with diabetes.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think almost everybody has got a different and a unique story to tell in terms of how they see diabetes, especially on how it is perceived by those living with it, and also learning from you people, staying with people, supporting people, witnessing people living with diabetes from the day-to-day life, everything that you know. So thank you so much. I think this is amazing, amazing truth that we also needed to reflect on. Thank you for making the time to be here. The next question that I have for the three of you: how has your partner's diabetes influenced your relationship on a day-to-day basis, emotionally, practically, and even spiritually?
Look, honestly, I think Leon's training is he's a trained quantum physicist. So I think when he was diagnosed, he absorbed every single thing and he managed it really, really well and continues to manage it really well. And in some ways, it's become part of our routine. It's part of our lives. We take things with us. We're prepared. It's probably a bit more preparation than what someone who doesn't live with type 1 to think about. It is that constant thinking. But I think he's managed it so well that in some ways, I think he's done that so that we don't worry, that our family doesn't worry, because I think he was concerned that it would have really deep emotional impacts for our children, for example. And so he wanted to really be a bit of an exemplar of you can live well and you can live with a condition. Yes, it has a mental load on him, and which I'm obviously aware of, but he wanted us to, we're talking about love and spirituality there. I think he wanted to lessen the burden for us at the same time. So we're there as a constant, we're there as his backup. We're obviously aware if there's an emergency what to do, and we're all sort of trained. It becomes part of our routine. We're all aware of it, and we all just pause and make space for when he needs to do what he needs to do.
I'm not an emotional person, but if that time comes, wow, I think I could be emotional. Maybe for now, let's go to Jakey. Oh, this is amazing.
I'll try and make you cry.
Our story is quite different in that Alistair's was diagnosed when he was 6 years old. He's just recently received his 60-year medal. It's been a long journey. We've been together since the late 70s. And way back then, there was very little monitoring, and it was a very regimented, straight, little flexibility sort of treatment and management of the system. He wasn't even finger pricking for his blood glucose. At that stage, all that was available were the urine dipsticks. We didn't have the information that's available now, which is probably the biggest difference in things, the amount of feedback and the amount of data that we have now to help to control blood sugar. Then I just had to learn the impending signs. Things I knew. He got grumpy. I like me saying that. He would have got very hot. And those were sort of the signs that a hypo was coming, and it was we treated it with sweet drinks and glucose as we do now, but it was much more ad hoc. It was much more of a guessing game. Yes, there were regular hospital appointments, but probably I knew Alistair probably 7 years before we were married. And really, I only saw my first hypo, I think it was 3 days beforehand. We had been really busy that morning. We'd been running around. We came back to my parents' home for lunch. By the time we got home, he was seriously hypo. I probably wasn't as frightened as I should have been, but I knew what to do and we did it. And he came round again. Probably scared my mum more than it scared me in my youth and naivety. But we got married. And can I tell my story now, Tino?
Yeah, please do.
So when we got married, I acquired Alistair, I acquired a Labrador dog, and I acquired a little saucepan, which has since disappeared, and his syringe, which I still have here.
Wow.
That's what he injected with.
Wow, that is amazing.
When we got married, with this lovely, delicate needle. That's even bent now. I don't know if you can see that, but
Whoa.
it's quite a... And that, every time it was used, that went back into the little saucepan and it was boiled up and it was ready for the next use.
Wow.
And that was where we started.
Wow.
So his mum handed me the saucepan and told me that was now mine and it was now my responsibility to make sure that everything was ready and to look after him. So very quickly learned the importance of things like, the organisation, the routine around meal times, planning events so that he could make sure he had his regular meals, because then that was, because he only injected set amounts at set times, it was really important that he also ate at set times. I mean, we laugh. We got married at 2:30 in the afternoon. Alistair says it's so he didn't waste the whole day. But really, it was so that he could have his lunch. We could have the afternoon and then get his evening meal at the right time. You learnt to carry hypo treatments. You learnt to make sure everything was there. In hindsight, at that stage, I'm still talking back in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, we probably thought he was very well controlled because he didn't have many hypos. But in hindsight, knowing what we know now, and with the monitoring that we do now, he probably was running far too high and therefore didn't drop down far enough to have the hypos. I suppose later on then you came to the Daphne course, the dose adjustment for normal eating. And that's when things then really became much more flexible, where he dosed for what he ate rather than ate for what he dosed. That really was a turning point, but that wasn't until 2012. There's a lot of time in between the 80s and 2012. Again, probably in the early 90s, we were in Europe for a holiday. We were in the Euro Disney Park and we had what we later discovered Alice had a retinal bleed. We were on driving holiday. He had 2 or 3 days where his sight wasn't great. I was panicking. I was going to have to drive home. But it cleared. In our innocence, we went on our holiday and then really only discovered when we came home what had happened. I mean, we're very grateful to the consultant in the Royal Victoria Hospital in Belfast, who then, and 20 years later, he then also had further eye problems. I mean, the consultant was absolutely amazing. He gave us his personal number. Over a period of about 5 years, we had regular retinal bleeds. And then Michael allowed us to text him an evening if it had happened, maybe 8 o'clock at night. Alistair would send him a text. Before we went to bed, we would have a reply. And it was basically, be here for 8 o'clock in the morning. And Alistair would get up and get on the 6 o'clock train, go to Belfast, which is about an hour and a half on the train from here. Walk up to the hospital, which was fairly close by, and that Michael would see him before his surgeries began for the morning, do whatever laser treatment was needed, and he would get back on the train, come back here and go on to work, basically. But he looked after him so well. We really are indebted to him for the way he cared for him at that stage. We get on with things. I have to say, my mother-in-law was amazing. I don't know if I had a boy of 6, if I would have coped as well. At 6, no phone, she didn't drive, she sent him off to school. The school really didn't, we're talking the 60s and 70s here, there wasn't any real care. I taught myself and was able to use the knowledge that I have from Alistair to help to support the children that I had in school. It was part of my job, but I had the experience. So his mum was amazing and taught him to be resilient, not to let it get in the way, and to just get on with things.
I'll be honest, the diagnosis hit us both very, very hard. My husband went from somebody who was extremely fit, he once ran 10 ultramarathons in 10 days, to somebody that suddenly had to kind of plan and count and carb load for every piece of physical activity that he was doing. It was a massive mental adjustment to the diagnosis. And it also happened right at the beginning of COVID, which is not a particularly great time to be diagnosed with a life-changing chronic illness because we were both confined to our flat and cut off from our kind of normal support systems. So it was very difficult. There was a lot of anger and frustration on both sides. He was fit, he was healthy. Why did this happen to him? For me, I felt very powerless. Like I wanted to be able to help, but I didn't know the best way to be able to help him. To kind of find that balance between being a support system, but also not being like a helicopter wife and overseeing everything and kind of getting in the way. It was very difficult to sort of find that right space. And it did take us a long time to get to grips with it. It took a long time as well to bring his blood sugar under control. We tried multiple insulins, multiple kind of changes to food, changes to diets. He was having hypos, hypers. It was all very messy. And it was the kind of closed loop hybrid pump that really kind of changed the situation for us and made it a lot more manageable and a lot more livable. And now we're in a place sort of, finally where we are living with it and we feel like we have life with diabetes. Whereas for honestly, the first couple of years, it felt like diabetes with a slice of life kind of thrown in. Again, COVID didn't help with that. But I think on the kind of flip side of that, the sort of silver lining, I suppose, to it all is that it has brought us. We were always a team, but now it's like we are a team. We have seen the best of each other. We have seen the worst of each other. There have been moments where he's had to trust me with his life. I'm not being dramatic when I say that. And I think when you go through something like that together, it brings you closer and you find a kind of intimacy and a connection that we wouldn't have had otherwise. So like as difficult as it is, I do feel like we are in it together and we are a team.
I don't know what to say. This is such a powerful moment, like from each of your reflections. They are deeply emotional and truly heartfelt. I think it's clear on how much the love, the strength, and the quiet resilience each of you bring to this diabetes journey. So thank you so much for your honesty. It's incredibly moving. And I believe that this will resonate with so many people that are going to watch this episode. While you were talking, I did with Dawn, one of the people who actually recommended that we do this. She's like, I'm looking forward to that episode already before you even finish it. So thank you so much for the grace and your honesty in everything that you're talking about right now, because yes, this is not drama. It's real life. It's not fictional. Where we are talking about life, the things, so that other people can get inspiration, motivation, and encouragement on how they're doing things. Because you managed to do this to support your partners. Coming from Norway, there was not enough information when your journey started, probably. So I think, and you managed to remain strong, and now you're here. There's so much now. Now there's so much. You choose what information you want to use, use which options you want to use if you have access to the options that are available. But I know in other parts of the world, these things that we're talking about, like hybrid closed loop, they're non-existent, right? As we proceed or as we move forward, I would love for us to talk about the balancing love and advocacy work. I believe everyone is an advocate. You're advocating for yourself or you're advocating for so many other people. If each of your partners are probably strong advocates for diabetes awareness, there's a lot that is happening in the space. How do you really support your partner in their advocacy journey while they're also nurturing your relationship behind the diabetes itself?
So for us, to be honest, I'm more of an advocate than my husband is. My husband is very busy with the day-to-day of getting on with it. For me, I mean, partially because I work in global health anyway. I'm a writer. I've been in this sphere for 15 years. Having direct personal experience of life with diabetes has made me much more of an advocate than I was before. Particularly for me, it's about awareness raising. You hear the phrase, but you don't look sick so often. And for me, it's really important to raise awareness around, okay, yes, somebody might be carrying something, and carrying it well, but that doesn't mean it isn't heavy. Really kind of showing people and talking openly about our experience, about what it means to live with diabetes, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly, so that people understand that and they can plan for it, they can make adaptations, particularly, in the workplace and in those environments where I think people just don't know. And, if you have a meeting and you're trapped in a meeting for 5 hours with no food or water, that's a problem. If my husband misses lunch because he's so busy that day, like that's a problem. And so it's really kind of raising awareness around that. And for me, as a partner of someone with diabetes as well, I'm building that understanding around the fact that diabetes doesn't just affect the person living with it. For every one person that's diagnosed, there are countless other people that are watching on the sidelines, like living closely with it, and to make sure that there's a support network for that side of the condition as well. And for my husband, to begin with, I mean, I think for both of us, it was very difficult to talk openly about the reality of the experience and what we both went through. And it's only been quite recently that we've started to, or that I've started to open up. I appreciate, I suppose, in terms of my husband supporting me, it's giving me the space to talk about that experience, because obviously my experience is deeply intertwined with him, and whatever I say about me, people then know about him. But he's very happy for me to talk about that, and he's actually very, very slowly kind of trying to write a book about it, and it's very personal, but he's very happy to be part of that expression and to support me with what I'm doing, because it impacts us both. It's not just my story intrinsically, it's his. He is there for me and willing for me to kind of talk openly.
Yeah, because I wanted to say that, yes, I know from everyone here, yours is actually unique because we don't even know who your husband is. For others, I know those people, right? So thank you so much for speaking up and using your voice, your passion. We are looking forward to reading the book that you're going to share, hopefully.
Yeah, in a couple of years when it's done, perhaps.
Yeah, more power to you. And now maybe we could go to Mary. Leon, if we had to talk about Australia or just diabetes advocates from around the world, we know that there's Leon and the pens that he manufactures. If you would share with us, how do you support? Or probably it's you also who is helping in the making of those pens from the insulin pens that are always sent from around the world. If you could tell us.
I really admire my husband's advocacy, as well as Jenny, who's just shared that with us as well. I think it's bold and I think it's necessary. I think particularly with conditions like type 1 diabetes and we might talk about that later, celiac disease, and what might be invisible to others. To be honest, I don't think he sleeps. I don't think my husband sleeps. And Jennifer can probably relate to this. Has a day job and then comes home and reads through medical papers and journals and makes his pens, or is on a call like this with other advocates from around the world wondering about how to improve awareness or a policy or looping, or he's off helping teenagers loop so that they can sort of get away from some of the stigma that perhaps Jackie was mentioning that her husband had to go through perhaps when they were younger. I really admire it. I think it's really bold, as I say, bold and necessary, and we need more people like that in the world. In terms of us, like I say, he manages it really well, and I think it's partly because he was such a reader at the start of it all. He didn't go on insulin straight away. He had some beta cells that he could protect. So it gave him a very unique, I guess, opportunity to absorb a lot of information, so that when he had to, he was even practicing looping before he needed to. So by the time he got to that point, he was kind of ready. He didn't have the, I guess, roller coaster journey that I know he has described to me, that others have had to experience, like what Jennifer's just explained and shared with us. So thank you. In terms of our household, I feel for my children because they have two sides of basically autoimmune, all sitting on the sort of same kind of genome. We're talking a lot about science in our household, and we were anyway, because of the nature of what his background had been. I think as a result, now have a son who wants to become a pediatric doctor and a daughter who wants to change the world. But I think sometimes they got absorbed with, and I don't know what it's like in your household, Jennifer, whether you guys talk about everything that's going on in the T1D community. I'd say probably. I don't know, Jackie, if it's the same for you. And so sometimes I feel for my kids who are like, can we just talk about Stranger Things or what's going on, latest music or what have you? We do that too. But ultimately, I really admire the advocacy work that he does. And it sort of spurs on my own advocacy work in my own professional life. And so more people like that. We need more people raising awareness, removing stigma. And we don't want pity. Empathy, sure, but ultimately the resilience in the communities are quite inspiring. So that's kind of where I sit on this particular one.
I feel like we could just close the episode, but I mean, there's a lot that we still need to unlock. And now we could go to Jake.
I agree with everything Maryjane and Jen have said. A couple of things that actually came up in the last question, I think, apply here as well. We are a team. We do everything together. We discuss what's going on. We discuss how we can improve things. again, picking up on another comment that was made about not being a helicopter wife, it's getting that balance right between supporting and monitoring and putting things in place to address hypos or whatever. It's being there, but not taking away the control from the person who has it. That's, for me, is really important. It's supporting without smothering. And it's through being a team and just doing it year in, year out, I suppose. You just become one in dealing with the whole thing. One of you said that your husband didn't sleep. I think in the very early days, I didn't sleep. During night times, it was a case of monitoring by just checking temperature and, were you warmer or colder, and waking, just all the things you have to constantly do. But as far as supporting through the advocacy, we work together. Alistair's the secretary of the local DUK support group. I've made great friends through the other girls that are there as well. I find meeting with them really useful. It's great to see other people having the same issues. Well, it's not great to see them having the issues, but it's good to understand that it's not just us. We want to give back. We want to support. We want to share what we know. We've had friends. They have recently had a son who's about 8 or 9, has just been diagnosed. Just letting them know we're here. Letting them know we can help them, letting them know that they're not on their own. Those are the sorts of things we can do. It's the peer support. It's getting information to those who need it. It's fundraising. Alistair does a lot of fundraising. Not sure if we get a chance to speak about that later, but one of the big things we do through the local group is on New Year's Day, we have a cold water dip up in the North Atlantic, which in January here is cold. We could have 200 or 300 people joining us, and we raise a lot of funds through that to help with research. I do what I can. We're both retired now, but I'm retired longer than Alistair. The other girls who are on the committee aren't retired, they're still working. So, I'm free to do running around. I'm free to collect things, deliver things, whatever they need me to do. I don't see our relationship as being beyond diabetes. I just see it as part of who we are. It's what it has always been. I've never known our relationship without diabetes. I haven't had to deal with the changes that the other two girls have had to deal with. It has always been there. I've never not known what it's like to live with a partner who doesn't have diabetes. So I haven't had to make that change. I suppose I just accept it as part of who we are, and it's what we are. I'm saying it's part of who we are and how we live, but we don't let it control us. It's never stopped us doing anything. So we try to control it. It doesn't control us.
What I took out from this was that we're a team. It is a shared journey. Everything that we do, the love, the support, the solidarity that each of you show isn't just behind the scenes. It's deeply woven into everything that you do. As a family, I truly believe that your presence, your strength in the partnership, they have shaped and empowered the advocacy journeys your husbands are on, and that you are on yourselves. You're part of the heartbeat of this work. So thank you so much for everything that you do. The next question that I have for you all, moments of vulnerability. I know that they're always there. If you could probably share with us a moment where you felt deeply moved or maybe challenged or transformed by your partner's diabetes journey. I think would greatly appreciate that. And I know it's going to resonate with so many people that are going to listen to this. If you could share that.
I feel in some ways that my experience is a little bit unique because I have such a unique husband in the sense of he goes through all the things we will have witnessed. He can get grumpy if he can get frustrated with his situation. However, listening to both Jackie and Jennifer and pondering on this as we've been talking through this session is that I'm kind of moved by Leon in a very different way because he's managed it so well. I know he's done it because he's trying to protect the people he loves on something that's invisible, something that we can't control sometimes. And to be honest, if there's anything to be vulnerable about, it's that I've had to watch his strength because he's held the line a little bit, much more so than perhaps he needed to. So the vulnerability piece is not so much about, say, fear or watching a situation where, as Jennifer has just so very poignantly expressed, having to literally save my husband's life. I've actually watched him maybe hold it a lot more And so I'm sort of moved by the strength of it, which is a little bit strange. And so that's vulnerable in a different way. So he's done that because he's trying to protect us. At the same time, I'm thinking, are you holding on too much? Because that has a mental load. So it's sort of a different take on it. So in a way, the whole situation is vulnerable. Every day is vulnerable. Every moment is vulnerable and has that load. And so perhaps I'm not unique. I might be unique in this conversation. There might be others who are in the same place where their partners are holding it, and it's admirable. There's a strength there. Nonetheless, it's being done from a place of love and protection, but that's a lot, right? That's a lot.
Thank you so much for that. And everything that you see reflecting much on the mental burden. It's something that is rarely talked about, and something, even if you ask people living with diabetes, they say one thing that you wish you knew. They always say, I wish that I have been told that mental health is part of my care. I wish we had a psychologist in my care as much as I needed to see an endocrinologist. Jennifer, what could you share with us?
The whole thing has been a challenge, if I'm honest, but it's really interesting listening to kind of Maryjane talk about the strength that she's in her husband. As somebody watching my own husband get to grips with it, is his sheer determination to get it right and to get on top of his blood sugar and the management. It has not been an easy journey. He had a phobia of needles before he started injecting diabetes. So even doing that without having to put a cardboard tube over the needle was a massive achievement. And he's tried, it was a slow process. He's tried so many different types of insulin, and as we say, so many different regimes, but he's stuck with it and he's found what works for him and what works for his body. And the story I'm going to share that I feel like exemplifies it. The star of the story is cinnamon buns, which might seem a bit of a strange thing, but it's the moment that stands out for me. And it was a couple of summers ago. My best friend was celebrating her 40th birthday, and we were all at a party at an outdoor bar. It was like gloriously sunny evening, and there was pizza, and there were the most amazing cinnamon buns you will ever have tasted in your whole entire life. And they were loaded with this kind of icing, sugary icing on top, with apple and cinnamon and speculoos and Oreos, everything that diabetic in theory probably shouldn't really eat that many of. My husband had, I think, I saw him have two to begin with. And then as the evening was progressing, I was going to go kind of continue out for drinks with my friends. And he decided that he was going to head home. And my friend gave him as a parting gift the box of leftover cinnamon buns. And I think there were probably like 4 or 5 buns in there. And we were at a point in the kind of diabetes where, to begin with, if it had been maybe 6 months previously, I'd have been quite helicopter wife about it and like, no, it'll kill you. You can't eat that many cinnamon buns. But we were at a phase where he'd really kind of got to grips with the management. And he'd also found that simple things like going for a walk after he had eaten would help kind of mobilize his insulin and help kind of bring his sugars down after he'd eaten like quite a lot of food. So I just sort of, I didn't say anything, had to bite my tongue a little bit, but I was whatever. It was so lovely to see him enjoying food and just being a bit kind of like his old self with food. So I was just like, I'll see you at home later. And it was maybe 2 a.m. by the time I got home. And he arrived home at a similar time because he'd eaten all of the cinnamon buns and he'd been walking them off for like an hour. But we got home, we had a cup of tea, we went to bed, and we woke up and his blood sugar was like bang where it should be. No major highs overnight or anything. And it just sounds like this simple thing, but I think that was really the moment where I thought, like, we've got this, we can do this, we can have a life with diabetes. And it was, it was cinnamon buns, but it was just to see that enjoyment and happiness and kind of, we're both big foodies, and kind of get a bit of that back and it not to throw everything into disarray, which it would have done previously, was quite a big moment for us, I think.
Oh, thank you for finishing that up. Knowing and understanding that for Jakey, I think she's in a very unique situation because there'll be moments on things that could probably have challenged you or maybe moved you or helped transform you. What would you share with us?
It's keeping going, and it's taking the positives when they're there and remembering the positives whenever it's bad. I mean, from Alistair's point of view, he is so upbeat. There's times I get cross with him because he's so positive. Can you not see what's going on here? There's no specific moment of vulnerability or something that, transforming his journey. It's his approach to dealing with it. Again, we've said it before, it's the 24/7 relentless nature of the condition. And he deals with it day in, day out, and he doesn't let it get him down. It's the resilience on the hard days, and there are hard days. We can sail along beautifully for days, even weeks. And then suddenly, for no reason at all, the blood sugars just go all over the place. 1 minute he's hypo, the next minute he's hyper, and there doesn't seem to be any reason for it. He hasn't done anything that he shouldn't have done. Then it rights itself and on you go. But it's in those bad days. Admire how he keeps the chin up and keeps going. Other people have no idea how much hard work goes into maintaining a steady blood sugar. It's not, I'm slightly asthmatic. I take my inhalers and my life is okay. It doesn't require the same 24/7 monitoring. You take the tablets and you're okay. And I don't think other people have any idea. When I say other people, those who have no experience of diabetes, they don't have any notion of that relentless, constant monitoring. I do get annoyed when people make a whole lot more of a whole lot less. It does annoy me because it's just very difficult to watch the constant worry and the constant work and the constant nature of the condition. I mean, he never lets it get him out of anything, just his perseverance. I'll go back to his parents again. They taught him to get on with it, not to let it control his life. The perseverance, resilience, hard work, they were values we both had instilled in us. Probably something that's transformed his journey, probably the introduction of the Libra, the blood monitoring system, later on going on to a loop pump. Those have been absolutely transformational. Even from the monitoring point of view, the night times, I sleep much better. His phone sits up beside the bed, and if I wake during the night, quick glance over, I can see what colour it is. As long as it's the right colour, I can go back to sleep. That has given me a huge amount of reassurance. His resilience, living with it, keeping upbeat in the hard days, and then the introduction of the technology have been the things that would have transformed the journey.
I think what stood out in this is that resilience does make a difference. You always have to have a positive attitude. Diabetes, I think, is one of the most complex chronic conditions because it requires so much on a daily basis. The things that you do today, if you do them tomorrow, they could have different results, especially on the blood sugar level. I think you see these things firsthand. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now we're jumping straight to inclusivity and visibility. And I think this is one question that I also asked the men supporting women living with diabetes. And now it's you, ladies. Do you feel like partners of men living with diabetes are included in peer spaces and conversations around care and support? And what would you like to see change if you don't see that enough?
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, because during the sort of journey and certainly the diagnostic process, I did feel very alone and unsupported, but I'm not sure how much of that was because of COVID and how much of that is because I live in Belgium and don't speak particularly great French. If I was in the UK, I would have clicked into kind of UK support systems. I feel like there are a lot of conversations and spaces for people that live with type 1 diabetes directly. And it was only earlier this year, Tino, as you know, that I kind of first ventured into one of those spaces with the Diabetes Voices conference. And I was quite nervous about it because I would think I was half expecting people to be like, well, you know, what are you doing here? You don't have diabetes. And I didn't know people would think I'm kind of like milking my husband's condition in some way. I was overwhelmed by how welcoming everybody was and how included, accepted I felt. And that conversation we had, Tino, afterwards as well, when we were just talking about it, it felt wonderful to have my experience validated in that way and to be reassured that I have a voice and I have an experience and that voice matters and that I do have something to say that's worth listening to. So I would like to see more spaces where I suppose it's kind of openly advertised that, you know, type F, as I've learned it's called, you know, families and friends are welcome. And also if I can sometimes be a bit crazy busy with work and get distracted, but also potentially, you know, kind of starting and forming some of those spaces for people, families and members and partners of people that have been diagnosed with diabetes. Because I think it is important to connect with each other and also with people that are living with it directly, because we have shared experiences and different experiences. And I would love to join and be part of creating more of those spaces and creating that support system.
Probably not in relation to formal situation, but locally we have really good peer support, which I suppose is what's important. I mean, Alistair sits on a couple of national committees, but I wouldn't be included in that. But I really value the local support that we have, and that goes from their formal monthly meetings where they have information evenings and topics of interest, and you know, we try to bring in last one there just a couple of weeks ago. We had the local hypo hounds. the dogs that are now being used to sense hypos for those who are symptomless. That was a really good evening and everybody enjoyed that. But it's a great time for people to get together. There are some partners come along, but not many. And I think there is a role for having some sort of a group where we as supporters could share our experiences and even just realise that other people feel the same as we do. We do have a local parents support group, and I think that's a really valuable thing to have. We probably could do with something the same idea, but for partners of those living, or just for the partners to come along to the support group meeting would also be useful. I like you. I haven't heard type F before. I like that. That's a good way of looking at it. Just talking with other people, understanding it's not just me, and knowing that other people are going through the same thing, I think is really, really valuable.
I think it's true. There's probably partners, and I love type F, hearing that for the first time, but I do think there's probably some value for all of us to come together if for when we want to. Some would want to be constant, some would want to dip in and because of circumstance that might be happening. And I think there's probably power in creating a bit of a movement with type F because we bear witness. We don't live with the condition, but we feel it too. And so therefore, I think there's an opportunity there to grow the army, let's say, to raise voices together. And so I think I would like to see more spaces that people can participate as deeply or as shallow as they would like. So I think, yes, I think there's definitely something there for all of us. We could be a worldwide movement. We bear witness and we support and we raise voices and we join in and we can testify. And I think that's powerful.
And I think it resonates quite deeply with everything that I usually say. Let's collaborate, let's join hands, let's and come up together to create the change that we think this world needs, because we are the people that make up the world, right? So thank you so much for sharing that, learning from you. What advice would you give to other women who are maybe new to being in a relationship with someone living with type 1 diabetes? And I know I'm going to marry her, so I would want my wife to listen to this. What advice would you give her? I live with type 1 diabetes. I've been living with type 1 diabetes since 2010. So what advice would you give to someone who is probably supporting someone living with diabetes?
What am I passing on? For the woman to keep a positive mindset, to try and be upbeat, to know that you've got this, that you can do it. I have a mindset of I don't have a choice, so just get on with it. I'm a doer. I'm very pragmatic. If I've got something to do, I just do it. I get on with it. And I think it's just there are things that have to be done and just accept that you've just got to get on. One of the things I suppose that's really useful is learning the relevant basic nutritional information, being aware of what a portion size of rice, a portion size of pasta, whatever, know what that looks like and how many carbs are in it. Makes your carb counting very easy, whether you're weighing it before or after, or you do it by spoon sizes or whatever, but know what your portion sizes are, know where to look for your hidden carbs, know the effect of other nutrients on absorption, know the effect of alcohol and blood sugar, know your partner's signs and symptoms, take spares wherever you go. Alistair got a new pump probably about a year ago now, but we had real issues with cannulas for it. I mean, we went nowhere without bags of spares because we were on a plane to London and the cannula came loose from his skin. And that was the first time. It was only new at that stage. And the cabin crew were fabulous. They got us sticking plasters. We got it stuck back down. And now it was only a day trip. We were coming back again that night. We managed to get it to hold the whole day. Got round London, got home again. But so you go nowhere without spares. Accept it's part of your lifestyle without letting it controlling you. It's planning and organisation. That's the key at the end of the day. So it's those practical things, but also trying to keep the mind in a positive place.
Maryjane, what would you add to that? I think that was amazing. A handful of tips.
I think it's really important to be curious but not controlling, and I think we've all sort of spoken at that. I think it's important to learn enough but to not make the person you love feel like a patient. I think that's really important, and I think the last bit of advice, you lead with love. I think it's really important to do that, and I think if you do those three things, be curious but not controlling, learn enough but don't make them feel like a patient, and finally lead with love. I think, there's always setbacks. We are perfectly imperfect as people, and so we're going to have days that are tough. We're going to have days where you're having a bad day, they're having a bad day, and it just doesn't gel. But I think if you lead with love, it all just circles back. So that would be my advice.
echo the sentiment of the others in terms of knowledge and understanding. Like, it is important to understand the condition, how it works, the signs and symptoms of hypos and hypers, the food, the basic nutrition, and how your own partner, how the symptoms manifest in your own partner. Trust is another one I would put in there. You have to learn to let go and learn to trust it's their disease, their condition to manage. You know, my husband has a vested interest in staying healthy, so I trust him to take care of himself and to manage his condition. And the third one I would add is to take care of yourself. Living with diabetes can be hard, and there are times when it can be hugely frustrating. As people, the phrase bear witness has come up. You know, you might not be living with it, but you are feeling it and you are bearing witness. It's okay to ask for help if you need it. It's okay to say, this is difficult, this is hard, to talk to people. I think for a long time I kept how I was feeling bottled up. Since I've started talking about it more openly, it's better. And if you, on an airplane, you put your own oxygen mask on first, you can only support someone if you are strong. It is perfectly okay to recognize that you have needs too, and to prioritize those and to put those needs first as well.
And thank you so much to everyone. Yes, no man is an island. We need someone. You're not a machine, even if you might say it. If they're going to be seeing a doctor, they don't have to feel like patients when they're home, right? That is a place of love. That is a place of support. Maybe I could relate with early children. If their parents, they're sort of bossy, they'll end up lying to them, not giving them the same results. But I don't know if your husband do that as well. I don't think so. They don't have to do that, right? Because there's a great support system. So thank you so much for the tips. Lastly, on the general questions. No, I didn't say last questions. On the general questions, that way for everyone. And then I will now go to the specific ones. Would want you to help us to shift the narrative. I know there's so many misconceptions, not just from people living with diabetes or from low to middle income countries, but everywhere. What is one common misconception about diabetes or caregiving that you wish the world understood better?
I think I would want to shift the narrative that people living with diabetes are fragile in some fashion. They're some of the most resilient people I've ever seen or known. I think I would want to see that shift in the narrative. And I think it's been interesting having this conversation because I think there's probably also a wonderful opportunity to also support those who support those living with type 1 diabetes. So I think that's also really great shift in narrative too. There's actually quite a large number of us, a movement that are all together trying to do the best they can to live well.
I feel that sometimes people think diabetes isn't a big deal. It's kind of like, whatevs. Diabetes is a big deal. Diabetes is a life-threatening, long-term condition. Managing diabetes is a 24/7 job that takes a huge amount of strength, resilience, and determination. I think it was Maryjane said, it's not about creating pity, it's just about empathy. And I think just understanding. The more you understand, the more you can support. Yeah, so I think it is just, as I say, it's just raising awareness around the fact that people might not look sick, they might be carrying it well, but there's work involved in that.
Just agree with both of you. It's that relentless nature of diabetes and also the unseen part of it. We laughed one day, we were out, we were walking, we noticed somebody wearing a Libra. We made the comment, oh, another diabetic. You don't know walking down the street who's walking past you. And people have no idea how hard it is just keeping that normal life going, just keeping well and managing and keeping things on track and keeping within your healthy range for blood sugar levels and all the other related conditions, the problems with eyes, problem with feet, kidneys, heart, all the other things that are related. I don't think there's an awareness of how many other conditions are linked to diabetes that are much more likely if you already have diabetes. Go back again to people taking the tablet. You have your injection, you live the way everybody else does. No, you don't. It's that constant, relentless monitoring and the lack of awareness of the other conditions that are linked. So it'd be good people had a better understanding of that.
Thank you all for sharing such powerful reflections. Your honesty, your love, your strength truly resonate. And it's clear your journeys are deeply intertwined with your partners and the support that it takes many beautiful forms that you all are doing and are taking. Would love to dive a little deeper into each of your unique contexts and experiences from your professional life, your personal life, to a better understand how your environments and your personal journeys have shaped your perspectives. So thank you so much for being amazing being honest and sharing on all those general reflections that the world does have. Now we're going to region-specific questions, also learning deep from your professional life. I think I'll start with Jennifer. From the Belgian and German context, your husband was diagnosed with LADR after your relationship began around COVID-19 times. How did the gradual nature of his diagnosis shape your understanding in your dynamic between the two of you?
It was a learning curve. We'd been married, I think, just over a year when he was first diagnosed. As with Maryjane, he didn't have to go on insulin straight away. It was progressive. I think we had maybe 18 months. It started with diet, then it was metformin, and then it was nightly insulin injections, and then it was kind of full on. Now he's 100% insulin dependent. Working between two health systems has been interesting. As I say, he's a civil servant, so we had the choice to kind of be treated in Belgium or Germany, and he chose Germany because he wanted to be able to have the care very understandably in a system he understood and in his mother tongue as well, to be able to speak in native German. His English is excellent, but I think, medical language, it's a whole new level. Because we had the time before the diagnosis and the insulin, there was kind of time to learn and prepare and to mentally wrap our heads around it. But I think nothing could have prepared us for what being insulin dependent really meant and kind of the full-on monitoring of it. But we've been very lucky. We've had a system that has delivered for him, of everything we've had to deal with. We've not had to worry about access to insulin. We've not had to worry about the cost of the different pieces of equipment that he gets. That's always been there. The technical side of it has been there. It's difficult having to work it between the two countries. Again, particularly during COVID, he had to quarantine for 10 days before going to hospital and then quarantine for 10 days after getting to hospital. There were a lot of hospital visits in those early times. It was difficult. And for me, sometimes it means that obviously there are maybe appointments that I would like to have been there for, to have been able to support, but I can't always take the time out to be in Germany. And also my German is not very good. So I wouldn't be of any use in the actual meetings. So sometimes there is a kind of, I'm reliant on his translations. I think I could get the message a bit sort of, second or third hand. So it can be a bit frustrating. We've made it work. And the system, from that side of things, the system really has delivered.
Thank you for everything that you do, your resilience, that volumes in everything that you do, and your advocacy journey now that we get to see in these global streets is talking about diabetes, advocating for diabetes. Sometimes the only way you could see that this other person next to you has diabetes is when you see a pump. But maybe in our parts of the world, it's a bit difficult because not everyone has access to that. It's only those very few people who has access to those things. So thank you all for all that you do. The question that I would want to ask you, Jackie, about the healthcare system in Northern Ireland. How do you view the Northern Ireland's public health system when it comes to diabetes care? Has it supported your partner adequately? What would you like to see improve?
There are pros and there are cons with the health system. Obviously, the huge advantage that we have is the National Health Service for the UK. It's free at point of need. So that means all anybody's consultation appointments, primary care appointments, all his diabetes-related medication, his insulin, his pump, all the supplies for that, his Libra glucose monitoring, and any other medication that is needed. That all is free. The four parts of the UK, when we get a medical prescription to go and get our medication, some parts you pay a small amount for each item, but Northern Ireland is completely free. So everything he needs is there for him and for anyone else who needs it. But the other side of the coin then, particularly in the last 5 years, there's been a drop in the number of consultation appointments and treatment appointments for things like podiatry, eye care. People are waiting a long time. Some people are waiting. If it's an annual appointment, they're maybe waiting 2 and 3 years to get that coming through due to lack of resources and funding. So that's the downside. Also, for some people, they're experiencing a slowness in getting set up with the technology. But it's the lack of appointments and the lack of seeing your consultant that has been the big thing, would be the biggest impact. Does it affect Alistair? He's very good at pushing and following up and chasing and getting his appointments. But if you're happy just to sit back and wait, then you could be waiting a long time to get to see the doctor. He has the technology and the ability to work it. And his work was involved. Basically, it was a data analysis job that he had. So he loves getting numbers and figures. And long before he even had the continual monitoring and it all done for him, he would have been logging his blood sugars on a spreadsheet and monitoring, following things through. So he's good at doing that. But out of a population of probably 2 million. There's about 100,000 living with diabetes, both type 1 and type 2, and many of them are not as well controlled and would have greater needs, more sort of instant needs. They're struggling to get the appointments to get those things dealt with. So that would be the minus side of the healthcare system here.
Thank you for that, Jakey. That is amazing. So I think I only had 2 questions each for everyone. We want to talk about the dual autoimmune awareness. You, as the CEO of the Celiac Australia and a parent of a child living with celiac disease, I would want to know, how has your professional and personal experience shaped how you support your partner living with type 1 diabetes? As you rightfully know that celiac disease is also an autoimmune condition that can actually come to someone living with type 1 diabetes. What would you like to share with the audience?
What's been a gift, I suppose, of having had the experience of living with someone with type 1 diabetes and then working celiac disease is that it enabled me to know what it is to live an autoimmune life. The fact that there's so many parallels to the conditions. That insight helps me understand of burnout, of stigma, of feeling like you're not seen, the frustrations around. And I think Jennifer was saying, just you've got a condition, when in actual fact what people should be offering is more empathy. I think talking about the different healthcare systems, and I think we talked about this, about the fact that I want to challenge the Australian medical system with something I think we potentially achieve, which is national screening of children in Australia. So Italy has obviously, and a big news obviously in the T1D community as well, they're doing the pilot screening for children with screening for T1D and for celiac disease. And I actually think the infrastructure, or the medical infrastructure in Australia, could potentially be better suited in some ways to potentially even beat the Italians. And so I've been speaking to people, including those in the T1D community, about how we might go about doing that. We have universal healthcare, we have a national immunisation schedule, we have a framework we could leverage. And the reason for that is, of course, we all know the conditions that can occur if you don't diagnose early. Whilst Leon and Jennifer's husband were diagnosed in their 40s, we've got many people who kind of come forward with these conditions as children. Celiac disease is known as the chameleon disease. You can not display the typical things to do with celiac disease, which is gut issues. You can present to hospital severe headache, and it can be celiac disease. You're quite right. If you have T1D, you have a propensity. Autoimmune conditions love company. They don't like to be on their own. And so you can get T1D and there's a propensity for celiac disease and vice versa. I think an important step, again, of making sure that we screen people as early as we can so that we can manage the condition as early as we can, whether it's T1D or celiac disease or potentially both at the same time. You do get those situations occurring in order to kind of help future generations. And I also think that if we can crack a cure for one, you will crack one for the other because they sit on the same kind of genome. And so I think it's important to screen, because then that highlights how many of us truly have this situation potentially about to occur or could occur. And so we monitor for that as soon as we can. So it's a bit of a cheeky throwing down of the gauntlet, but I do think Australia has potentially the best chance of doing so. And we could potentially be the first country in the world to roll out an integrated screening at scale. So it's a bit ambitious, but I think living with 2 individuals who live with the condition, I said the conversations at my dinner table can be quite intense. I feel for my daughter at times. I think the cross-learning between the conditions is kind of something that we should all be aware of and try to raise awareness for.
Wow, thank you all so much for everything, sharing your personal, how it has influenced your professional life, the things that you have to do now, trying to raise awareness, learning more so that you can support other people as well. So thank you so much. And even for challenging the narratives that are in your context, and also having those benchmarks to say, yes, we want to challenge those systems and see if we can get to that level, like what Italy is doing. And I've heard a lot Italy being shared in these conferences of the things that they're doing in terms of screening, not just celiac disease, but even for type 1 diabetes. So much to learn, and these are the gaps that we can also try to close if we keep on learning, researching, getting to know what is happening maybe across the borders. That is just amazing. The last question that I have for you all, not for, I mean, I have one question each. Jackie, do you feel that diabetes, especially type 1 diabetes, is well understood in your local context? And are there any moments where stigma or misunderstanding has affected your journey as a couple?
No, I mean, I think we've already sort of established that for the general public, no, it's not a well understood condition. Part of that general ignorance is probably impacted also by the way it's portrayed in the media. And we were watching a medical drama on the BBC not that long ago where there was a mild hypo case, was admitted to a hospital, and then they started and discussed all symptoms of hyperglycemia. That sort of thing coming through on mainline television and sort of just programs that people watch, it's causing confusion. It's not helping to dispel fears and myths surrounding diabetes. Surely those things should be more accurately checked before they're broadcast. Stigma, I think there's a huge stigma with type 1, possibly a bit more with type 2, as people see it as something that you can do something about because it's a lifestyle related issue. Again, the ignorance coming through. Alistair has a treat. He doesn't eat things at home that he knows aren't beneficial, but if we're out, he enjoys something and he'll have that and he can then inject and balance with it the insulin. You know, people will stop and say, are you allowed that? Why are you that? There's nothing more serious in terms of impact on us personally. As mentioned earlier on, part of my role during my careers when I was teaching, part of my role was pastoral care, making sure that children who had all sorts of conditions got the support that they needed. But I mean, I can honestly say I taught for nearly 40 years, and in all of that time, I never was aware of an incidence of a pupil being made to feel different or being bullied or anything by any other children due to their condition. It was generally accepted. We as a school tried to integrate and let the kids deal and manage their condition in the way that they felt most comfortable, and it just became part of life. Well, I suppose I had a big influence on that because I led that area of work, but because of Alistair and of the way he has always just made it part of life, I was very keen that the children shouldn't feel they had to run away and hide. They should just manage their diabetes and do what they needed to do where they needed to do it. And if they wanted to manage their diabetes publicly, that was fine. If they wanted somewhere private, that was fine. If they required a snack during class, that was fine. We just got on with it. Didn't make a big deal. And I have to say, we didn't ever have an issue in that context. So misunderstanding, minimal. It's the way we have dealt with it as well.
Thank you so much. Almost everyone gets hands on it. People are raising awareness. You don't just wait for November to raise awareness. There's a lot happening. Peer support, people are meeting in dining rooms, people are having dinner, people are talking about diabetes. Almost everyone is wearing a pump. Everyone can ask, what is this? So thank you all so much for all that you do. And the last question that I have for Jennifer, from the cross-border care that you get, I know that your husband receives care under the German healthcare system while you're based in Belgium. Share with us what it's like navigating this cross-border healthcare. What has worked well and what complexities have you encountered doing that?
To be honest, it's not been that difficult logistically. Logistically, it has been tricky. Obviously, as I said, particularly during the COVID pandemic with all of the isolation around it. But there's things like, so for his equipment, they can't send the equipment across borders. Presumably there's something to do with, I don't know, the black market of equipment. I don't know the reality. So we often have to get it sent to his parents and then sent to us, which when his pump broke and we needed a new pump was a bit of an inconvenient delay. But still, I was surprised at how quickly these new items of equipment could get across. It's difficult from, I think, some of the day-to-day care aspects, like if you just need to quickly see someone, there's no quick about having to see someone in Germany. I mean, it has a GP locally, but for more specialist care, obviously with German, but it's planning. Because we're very lucky that it is EU, freedom of travel, freedom of movement of goods and things, like it all works a lot better than I thought it would when we go into it. I know that we are hugely lucky with that. I mean, as I say, with the work that I do and what I know of kind of the systems in kind of more resource limited settings, there isn't a day that goes by where I don't think I'm thankful for the pure luck, and luck is the only word for it, really. The luck that we have to be in a country and a context that can get us the equipment when we need it, because millions and millions of people with diabetes don't have that luxury. It shouldn't be a luxury, but we are very fortunate to live in that context and to be within two very, very competent health systems.
Thank you so much, even for sharing part of the things that you see happening in lot medium countries. I'm also into when I see people, we want to advocate for this. We want to see a better system. We want to see the systems improve. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You guys are getting things for free. We are paying for everything. What are you talking about? But I mean, it's always great because I know that even if you have the best systems, talking about it, you could actually protect them or defend it. Because if you don't, all those victories or those luxuries you could lose. It's always great to always challenge systems and see how best you can get better care.
I think one thing my husband is acutely aware of is how much his life depends on a system. That supply chain is hugely complex. I mean, everything from the laboratory testing for the bloods, the development of the medical devices, the shipping of the devices, the manufacturing of the insulin. I wonder sometimes if you draw a picture of the system and what it takes to keep my husband alive on a basis, the whole healthcare system around that, it's phenomenal. And it only takes one element of that to break and the whole thing
And
can
collapse.
fall down. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for that. That is amazing. The last question that I have for Mary. So many people have fled. Yes, I would use the word flood. They're coming to your country. I don't know if they're going to cause a huge pressure on your healthcare systems because we are impressed by your healthcare systems as well. What are some of the strengths or maybe the gaps you have experienced in Australian healthcare system when it comes to managing type 1 diabetes, especially from a partner's point of view?
I think what I've observed, because not unlike Jackie and Jennifer, we do have universal medicine. So there is enormous access to, we like to call the kit, needles, strips, pumps, etc. All of those things are subsidized and covered, or there's a very minimal amount that needs to be paid to basically keep my husband alive. Where there's a gap, it's when we start to see other issues occurring. It might be, for example, if you are someone with type 1 diabetes who might have a heart condition or heart-related matters. You might have it in your family. You might have heart condition pieces in your sort of background. The insulin might have changed your BMI, etc., because of all sorts of various reasons, and you should be on Ozempic. If you have type 1 diabetes in Australia, you don't get access to that, but you do if you have type 2. So there are gaps like that in the system. And so I know that JDRF or Breakthrough T1D and Diabetes Australia are kind of trying to advocate for that for the government to subsidise those things. And so there's some outrage in the system where someone who is perhaps wanting those medicines for glamour, who are not a diabetic, they can get access to that on a private script. But then that takes, I was just thinking about what Jennifer was saying about supply chain. Now the people that do need it can't access it, and those with type 1 diabetes go to the bottom of the list, just like someone who's just wanting it for glamour reasons. So for me, that's actually quite a nasty gap, because someone who needs it as a medical necessity versus someone who follows influencer, I find absurd. And I'm sure, I think there's other parts of the world who have those similar issues. I did want to say in my previous role, I was working for Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders. So medical access for me, whether it's a partner of someone with T1D or in my role, CEO of Celiac Australia, medical access for me is still of concern when you're in regional areas of any country, or we're talking about First Nations people. In Australia, whilst we have wonderful universal healthcare, there can be struggles and issues for specialists and doctors in regional Australia and then First Nations people. So that becomes quite a concern for me in terms of a gap. Being ex-Doctors Without Borders or Médecins Sans Frontières, I always worry when a war breaks out, there's a natural disaster about what happens to people who have T1D, what happens to people who have celiac disease, because suddenly access to medicine, access to doctors, supply, etc. is impacted. And I know the advocates do an amazing amount of work around that, including my husband, and making sure that insulin goes to places like Ukraine and what have you. And then what happens with food and access to food. So if you have celiac disease, for those who don't know, you cannot eat wheat, oats, barley, or rye. You cannot have that in your diet. If you do that, it destroys your gut. And so if you're in a war-torn situation, what happens? You just got to find whatever you can find. And so there's so much overlap in both of the conditions, whether it's daily management, social isolation, or food stress. And so whether you're living a Jane Austen life and you have access to everything, there's still that load, or whether you are in the most desperate of situations, I think we are stronger together. I do sometimes wonder if there's a case around autoimmune conditions. We are stronger together to raise awareness and to create public policy in our countries. So I think there's, again, such a magnificent opportunity for us to do so.
I'm out of words. So as we wrap up this beautiful and vulnerable conversation, I want to say thank you to Maryjane, to Jackie, and to Jennifer. So thank you so much for reminding us that partnership is not just about presence, but it's also about empathy, curiosity, and the unwavering care. Thank you for your unwavering support that you give to your husbands, and also maybe paying attention to what is happening in the world as we try to advocate for the things that we need, because if we don't protect it, I know that we could actually lose. Learning from what is happening now in the HIV scenario, I know that things are a bit shaky at the moment because of the support that we were getting from the West, especially to people living in low to middle-income countries. So I think your reflections today have showed us that how relationships have shaped chronic conditions like type 1 diabetes, which is not diminished. So thank you. But often we're dependent by the journey and the things that we see. So I think that your voices and remind us that advocacy is not just about public speeches or policy change. It is also happens around dinner tables, the things that you see in the houses, during conflict nights, and even in the quiet acts of everyday care. So thank you to every listener that is going to watch this or to listen to this, whether you're living with diabetes, walking along someone living with type 1 diabetes, or whatever form of diabetes, or whatever form of non-communicable disease. I hope this conversation affirms your value and your strength. Until next, any last words from each of you?
I just want to say thank you, really, for the opportunity to be able to speak. It's the first time I've really been able to sort of speak publicly about the experience, and it means a lot. And it's been wonderful. This is also the first time I've met two partners of people living with diabetes, and definitely the first time I met someone who's the partner of someone with LADA as well. So thank you so much. And I hope that we can continue offline to kind of talk about some of the things that have come up today, particularly like the movement and support and what else we can do as a Type F kind of community.
Likewise, I just want to say it's been so delightful, and I feel very privileged to have, I sort of feel like I'm infiltrating a little bit too, because I'm sort of coming in from a Celiac Australia perspective. It's been so delightful to meet these two magnificent women and hear their journeys. Thank you so much for the program to allow us to occur, and to all the people that are watching this series. Do join the movement. So I love Type F. So let's make that a thing. Join the movement.
Thanks, Tina, for the opportunity. As the other two have said, it's good to meet people who are in the same position. It just helps us all realize we're not alone and we can support each other. So thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. This has been amazing.